Welcome to Show Your Priors. We're your co-hosts, Michael Nichols and Jason Thompson. We're a business strategy podcast. We look at the week's latest stories and rip them apart to see what lies underneath. On tonight's show, we interview an AI product and strategy expert, Ann T. Griffin. If you're interested in AI, you'll want to stick around for that one. Or feel free to use the chapter listings below and you can jump around. But before that, we'll take a run through the fire hose. But right now, let's dig into the headlines. Microsoft has entered the chat. At Build Conference 2026, they introduced a wide range of AI, including 7 proprietary models and an OpenClaw assistant. Mike, what's your take on Microsoft as they build their own AI stack?
We've been talking about this one for weeks now. It wasn't clear if what they were going to do is similar to Apple, where you own the channel and the customer, and then you sort of treat the foundation models, Claude, Gemini, the rest, as, or ChatGPT as well, since they have a partnership with OpenAI, you treat them as suppliers, basically. They supply the models, and you integrate them into your ecosystem. But then we saw a story a week ago, 2 weeks ago, where their own devs prefer Claude Code, and Microsoft shut that down really quickly. Why? Because it looks like, at least that seems to be the way they're perceiving, especially Anthropic, we'll talk more about Anthropic here in a minute, as a threat to the ecosystem. So if their value proposition is actually better and they're getting traction in enterprise, that becomes a threat to Microsoft very quickly. So I think Microsoft felt it had to respond and stick to, we own the ecosystem, therefore we're going to develop our own models. So they chose to do it in-house. Whether they're as good as the others, I don't know. That'll be seen. And what I found interesting there was they're integrating something similar to OpenClaw. So yeah. OpenClaw is like,
it's the assistant, so it's going to live inside of Teams and Outlook, and it's not going to be like a chat interaction. It's going to be something that sits and looks at what you're doing on a workflow, and it's going to start scheduling meetings for you, doing meeting prep, that kind of stuff above, like without you having to interact with it at all. Sounds pretty cool, but it's built on OpenClaw, so I'm also wondering if it's just going to delete everything.
Well, that was one of the notes that I saw, is they're increasing the security of it to make sure that it doesn't have that ability.
Yeah.
I don't know how they guarantee that, but wasn't it a Microsoft VP who had all of her...
I think it was a Meta security person.
Yeah. Had all of her emails deleted. Well, let's see. Maybe Scout will scout out your emails and say, you don't need to read those. I got you.
Yeah. The interesting thing to me is really the pace that Microsoft's able to catch up, because they're touting figures that, and this happens with every AI announcement. They tout figures where, we're outperforming Opus in this metric and Sonnet in that metric. But it really is stunning now that we have all the AI probably engineers in their places, because, the bidding wars for those minds was on, all through last year. But now that those pieces are set and all the big companies have their players, it seems that the speed at which they're able to catch up with each other is crazy. Because Microsoft, I don't know when they started this effort behind the scenes, but publicly they started this last year, maybe halfway through the year, and they're already at and above where Anthropic is, which is one of the leaders. It's very impressive, and it begs the question to me is, what the hell are we doing? Why is everyone chasing this so fervently with so much spend, if when the first company gets there, the second company can catch up in a month or two?
Well, that's a great question. It goes to the heart of, is this a winner take all? Obviously not. I think we see proof all over the place. This is not winner take all. You got Gemini, you got Google Enterprise, Google B2C, you got Microsoft Enterprise, you got Anthropic going in Enterprise, you got OpenAI doing a little bit of both. And that's only good for the buyers, right? That's really good for the buyers, because if you have competition, you can trade them off of one another, get your prices down. But it does call into question, here's the way to think about it. Here's the question I want to ask. Would you rather be Microsoft or Anthropic right now?
Microsoft.
100%. Yeah, why?
Because you already have the channel. You already have the customers. You just now have to implement stuff, and you can start building this into contracts and generating additional revenue stream almost immediately with your own services now that they're not having to pay, OpenAI.
And you get to split up your funding, right? You can concentrate now your funding on developing the AI in-house because you already own the customers. Doesn't mean you don't do further business development, but imagine you're Anthropic. You got to do all that.
Yeah.
You got to build the channels, and they're doing it fast, but when you're competing against Microsoft, who now has competing products, I don't know if they're as good. We'll find out. Then you have to split up your mind share into business development and into the models and keep developing and developing and developing. And strategically, that becomes a dilemma. Where do you place your capital?
Yeah.
I would rather be in Microsoft's shoes, but Anthropic's got a good brand already. They're developing that. Claude Code seems to be beating all of them. Even Microsoft's devs seem to prefer it. They don't like to eat their own dog food, as the saying goes, but maybe that'll change.
I see a world where we still, at the end of the day, have Apple, Google, Microsoft, Meta, and the new players get absorbed in some way just because they don't have the channel. I don't know. That's just a thought. Something I thought was really interesting with this one was the quantum computing announcement. So Microsoft, IBM, Google are the big players in quantum computing. Google and IBM went one direction. Microsoft, from my understanding, went another direction called Majorana, which is a particle that may or may not exist, as I understand it. But they announced a new chip that is supposedly that the quantum particles can exist stably for up to 20 seconds, which the other IBM and Google measure their stability in nanoseconds at this point, or microseconds, I think. So it's a huge jump in performance in quantum computing. And Microsoft actually said by 2029, they're looking for a commercially available quantum computing product, which is really pushing up the timeline for when we thought this stuff was going to be feasible. And quantum computing is a big deal because it's going to change, think Y2K, it's going to be like that except for a real deal because quantum computing it's going to break so much encryption and bit blockchain as well. So I don't know. That was a really interesting point that caught my eye.
We will talk about it as it comes.
Absolutely. Yeah. No. All right. Let's move now to Florida. Always interesting stuff happening in Florida, but they have become now the first state to sue OpenAI, and they're also going after founder Sam Altman personally. The complaint ties ChatGPT directly to the FSU campus shooting and also a teen suicide. This would have some serious implications for AI going forward if it succeeds.
Well, when you look into the facts of the case, I think this is going to be very difficult legally because of proximate cause, right? So it looks like he used OpenAI, the shooter at FSU, I'm just going to refer to that one, to plan the attack. And they have kind of a theory that it aided and abetted it, but it's not an actual person, right? It's an AI that the user himself, in this case, I think it's a him, right? The shooter used to plan the attack. So this goes back to, you can bring in guns and other things. Who is responsible, the gun or the person, right? It's going to be the same with AI, I think. Who is responsible, the AI or the actual shooter? And this is going to get into some very thorny territory. And I was just thinking through it. The worst outcome is that you slow AI to a halt because of the fear of liability, right? And American companies already have that because we're a very litigious society. The best outcome is that you take this as an opportunity at OpenAI and others to educate your users, because that's what they're accusing them of, is that they didn't properly inform the users of the dangers of using AI, that they were making claims that it's safe to the point where even kids can use it. So will a waiver be enough to get over this? But then you have to start marketing it differently. You're implicitly, not even implicitly anymore, you're explicitly admitting that there are dangers in using AI. Now, I would be in favor of educating the populace on those trade-offs of using AI. We talked about it a lot, right? The hallucinations, the sycophancy, and I imagine this shooter got a load of both of those, right? Depending on what he was actually putting into to the machine and what he was getting out. The other thing, the more speculative part is, why now? It's curious, isn't it? OpenAI going for IPO, and this story comes out in Florida, one of, I know where you might take that.
Yeah, no, they're looking for a settlement. this has just now been submitted. It's not, I imagine that Anthropic's and Sam Altman's attorney will motion to dismiss. Who knows how that's going to play out? It may get dismissed. There's laws in place that prevent platforms like Meta, LinkedIn, those type of platforms. They're prevented from, content that's created that is harmful on them exists, but they're not at fault because they're not the ones creating it. They're just a platform, right? And I think those laws are founded in good, solid theory. And they went a different route with this, and it was consumer protection, I think. So they end around that law set to get to another one where consumers need to be protected by, false marketing, that type of stuff. So this falls under that bucket. I don't know how it's going to play out in court, but you're right. A big high-profile lawsuit right now could really tarnish the IPO hopes. Just the profile of OpenAI right now is in flux, I would say, with all the there's a lot floating around Sam Altman as it is right now. So
how close is Elon to DeSantis? I don't know. If you wanted to go down that route,
right?
I'm sure somebody has made that connection, right? But what's difficult here is this goes to the heart of the corporate form, right? Yeah. To hold an executive personally liable inside of a corporate form, we'd have to look at actually OpenAI's form, what they are actually.
Yeah.
They're for sure going to take on the corporate form going into the IPO. So that goes to the heart of, should executives be personally liable for such decisions? Assuming there was a decision, you could also say this as well. It was a sin of omission, right? That they were negligent. Yeah. That would be interesting. I'm not exactly opposed to executive liability for really egregious acts, but that does start to raise the question, what happens to corporate form in the era of AI? We'll have other stories later where you're asking, what is the responsibility of the humans who are deploying AI? And those humans can be executives, et cetera. So, if you're committing crimes, I doubt you're shielded from liability in corporate. So that's always been true.
Yeah, if you look at Jeffrey Skilling from Enron, he went to jail for 12 years? Probably should have been longer. Sorry, Jeff.
Well, fraud, the things that are illegal, right? You'll be held accountable for. But this looks like it's more of a civil suit.
Good point. Yeah, to me, this is it's a cash grab in a way, but also has implications for the future. I don't think that if someone uses a Milwaukee chainsaw in a way that they shouldn't, Milwaukee shouldn't be at fault, right?
Exactly. That's where my mind took it. Is this going to be just a debate around what product liability looks like for AI?
Yeah. Yeah.
Or would this whole case change if you move your headquarters to Florida?
It just might. American-made humanoid robots are being tested on the Ukrainian battlefield. Back home, military leaders are split on how fast to hand AI lethal decision-making power. Where do you draw the line, Mike?
I think we want to look at why this is happening, and this happens in every war. I think everyone, you're aware of the statement, you're always perfectly prepared for the last war. The problem is the next war doesn't look like the last war, so on the fly. So I think the American military has been lucky in this instance because you're not directly involved in the conflict where you're getting punished for not being technologically up to date.
Yeah.
And I think what we've seen in that war, we talk a lot about the lion and the fox. And Russia's clearly the lion. They're coming in with massive number of troops. They have manpower. They had technological power, weapons power. And Ukraine has responded by being the fox. And apparently it's getting so good at deploying drones.
Yeah.
Long-range drones. A drone took down the Russian Navy, right, in the Black Sea. And now apparently they have long-range drones that are reaching all the way up to the Baltic Sea in St. Petersburg.
And they're cost-effective too. Those drones.
They're cost-effective, right? Yeah. So this is kind of like when America went into World War II, the German technology was superior to our tanks, right? The Tiger tanks, et cetera. So we just threw our industrial might at it and just produced tanks at scale, and you just beat them with numbers. At least that's the mythology around what happened. That's one of the explanations. And I think this is what's driving it is hell, a poorer nation with, less developed technology militarily could hit us. Mm-hmm. Our harbors are exposed. If you can throw a long-range drone at us, do massive damage, and that drone costs you almost nothing. So the tactics have to change. How do you deploy these drones? I know the Russians are having a hell of a time defending against drone attacks. They're soldiers, right? Because how do you detect them? They have drone swarms now. There are a lot of startups around that technology. How do you create like a net of drones, like a cyber net of drones, right? And then you have Iran going on. So you got these traditional strategic questions, the lion, the fox, volume versus differentiated. And then what's really driving it is AI seems to be driving a lot of the decision making behind it. So these unmanned vehicles or autonomous systems will be driven by AI. And even military experts, I think rightly so, are asking the question, how can we guarantee that the violence that we intend, that was one of the quotes, against our enemy targets stays limited to that target? We want to make sure that we can deploy the violence exactly where we want it. And if we're outsourcing that decision making to AI, how can we guarantee that it stays within those bounds?
Yeah.
So I think those are all good debates to be had around, well, military in general, military strategy and strategy in general.
Yeah. I think there needs to be a human accountable for lives that are taken by AI action. Like I just think at the end of the day, there needs to be a decision maker who is accountable for the actions of those AI. And if there's any doubt that it's wrong, then they'll be less likely to say go. I just think that needs to be the fail-safe at the end of the day. And I think that was the position that Anthropic was taking that put them at odds with the government, is that they wanted a man in the middle for anything that was going to take life. And I think that's a completely valid
of course
thing.
But it's also trade-offs, right? You would probably prefer to send in humanoids instead of humans into battle, right?
Yeah,
because that's
we're very averse to losing lives. Yeah, this solves a lot of problems.
Rightly so. So on the one hand, it can protect our own troops, our own national security folks, etc. On the other hand, you don't want to be having it go wild and kill civilians on the other side either. They're not at fault, right? They're just innocent bystanders. So trade-offs, I always talk about trade-offs. There's a trade-off in safety here versus maneuverability and staying up to date militarily to make sure you can keep the nation secure against these new threats. And they're appearing all the time. And I'll tell you, I would not want to be China thinking about trying to take Taiwan with this new technology appearing. You send a fleet around and you try to encircle it, and they sink your entire fleet with cheap drones. I would be way more nervous about that than I would have been 2 years ago.
That's why there's such a push right now to divest, all the chip production that we can to, Samsung's doing a lot, Google's doing their own stuff. So hopefully we can catch up with where Taiwan is at some point in that regard, just because it is such a high risk situation there. One thing I did want to call out in this, because I always call it out, is that Eric Trump is the chief strategy advisor for Foundation, who is which is the company that is making these bots. And I always like to call that out. Don Trump Jr., he's the strategic advisor for both Polymarket and Kalshi. Just, I don't know.
You should call it out. I think this is one of the great uses of AI, to start mapping out who sits on what boards, who are the investors, etc. And you can start to see some of this stuff. It's important to see.
There's some interesting patterns when you do take a minute to look at it, for sure.
Indeed.
Let's talk about GoPro, who just filed a going concern with PricewaterhouseCoopers, one of its auditors. The culprit is AI data centers are consuming memory chips at such a rate GoPro can't get them at a price that makes sense, and they already have buy commitments or spend commitments to buy them, so they're going to get not the volume that they need to make profit. So they're looking potentially at a bankruptcy. Do you think there's a lot of other companies out there that are in the same boat, Mike?
I question the assumption here. I think the chips are a compounding factor to a company that was already deeply in debt and posting losses.
Yeah.
So it could be like the last straw to break the camel's back, as we say. When you look backwards, they've been accumulating debt obligations. And when you accumulate debt obligations, eventually the bill comes due and then you're going to be bleeding cash. Why are they bleeding cash? They will be bleeding cash if they still are trying to buy chips, right? That's for sure. And the price is only going up on the chips. We'll talk about this later, why that is. But what seems to be the problem here was the rise of the smartphone and drone technology and other things and just trends moving away from you.
Yeah.
I mean, we know on YouTube, right? We're facing the same thing. Trend moves away from you, nobody watches you. Trend moves towards you, you blow up.
Yep.
And then 2 years later, you implode, right? Right. So, I think GoPro, it's a confluence of many factors leading to a business model that is failing.
Yeah.
And they've tried some. I saw they made a disastrous drone acquisition, a company that makes drones. That didn't work. And I think, yeah, the chips are a part of the story, but the bigger story is your business model's in trouble.
Yeah, it all goes back to Buffett's quote: "When the tide goes out, we're going to see who's swimming naked." And in this case,
They were riding high.
Yeah, well, at one point they were.
They were riding high at one point, and we talk about brand identity a lot. They probably were trapped in that brand identity. When you hear GoPro, you're only I'm thinking somebody on a jet ski.
Well, yeah, exactly. I'm sure everyone who shoots, sports action type footage has a GoPro already. Make a good camera. Why would they need to buy a new one? The new ones, how are you going to innovate and get people to buy that? Same thing with the iPhone. We were talking that, because it's a status symbol, people don't buy it unless the camera stuff looks different, because then it's a signal to let other people know that you bought the new one. GoPro doesn't have that type of status symbol, so there's no need for me to go buy a new one every couple of years. So the market's probably saturated. There's a lot of good competition out there nowadays, especially, as you mentioned, with cell phones having their own camera. So that takes the average user out of the picture. So yeah, I think it's just one of those things for that
Shrinking
company
market.
is just going to keep shrinking, and it just is what it is. I don't know. It was inevitable in some cases.
Hey, that's how I remember sitting in Imperial College, and this young Chinese woman made the comment, "So what? If they fail, they fail. That's how innovation works, and that capital gets freed up for the next bet. Maybe it's GoPro's time is up."
Absolutely.
That's the way capitalism works.
I agree. The chip prices, I do think there are going to be some other companies out there with issues that come up because of this.
That's a real factor, right?
Yeah, it is. And I know back in when Bitcoin mining was blowing up, we had a similar issue with the chip shortage. And I think that was actually right before COVID. So we had the Bitcoin mining thing blowing up. So graphics cards were getting purchased and computer hardware were getting purchased left and right. And then on top of that, we had COVID with the shipping issues. So we've kind of been here before. I think we'll weather the storm. It's just, again, you need to have enough cash on hand. And we'll talk about Google and what they're making a play right now doing to have enough cash on hand, because that's something you have to consider as both a large company and as your household, quite frankly. You can't just be running mountains of debt, because at some point an emergency is going to happen. All right, let's move on now to Harvard Business Review and their third annual study on real-world AI adoption. It found that usage is widening across nearly every domain, but warns of a growing trend researchers are calling think slop. People outsourcing cognitive tasks to AI rather than using it as a thinking aid. In the business world, the study finds lots of AI activity, but mostly marginal rather than game-changing outcomes.
Yeah, I'll start on the business side because, as you know, I talk a lot about I'm developing my own application. Well, we are. Mm-hmm. And just on a demo call the other day, I was asking that question, how are you using AI? The number one answer is, I'm not. This isn't a massive company, right? Yeah. Like billions of dollars in revenue every year. When they do use it, I think some of those show up on this list, maybe not. It's kind of in that, what we talked about with Scout. Mm-hmm. They're using it that way to organize emails, to help write emails faster, maybe to draft a PowerPoint, that kind of stuff, like personal productivity. Now, when you go to the actual visual here, what I found interesting is number one, people are, this is interesting.
Same. Scary.
Right? It's scary, actually. People are using it for therapy and companionship. Mm-hmm. And then troubleshooting. Maybe they're troubleshooting their companionship. Fun and nonsense, I get that, right? That there are many uses for that. Fan fiction and storytelling. You'd have to dig into what each one of these categories actually means. But therapy, companionship, relationship advice, this goes back to that Florida lawsuit. Do people understand the trade-offs in AI? Do they understand the sycophancy problem?
I don't think so.
Do they understand the hallucination problem? My fear is they don't.
Yeah. I mean, therapy and companionship being number one is, it blows my mind. I've seen some, I watched a documentary.
It's not surprising though.
I watched a documentary on a lady who had an AI boyfriend and was, trying to make her family okay with it and stuff. It was really weird, really strange to me, because there's nothing about AI that would, say, oh, this understands the human condition. Why would you go to AI for therapy? Like, what is it about AI that you think it understands the psyche and gives you advice on how to?
I think it's
crazy.
The anonymity.
Yeah.
Behind it, like you feel like you can talk to this thing, although courts will call that document if something bad happens, right?
True.
We've seen that.
All being saved somewhere.
Right. Number 9, Jason. Astrology and tarot readings. Actually, AI is probably really good at that one because it is a stochastic, probabilistic machine. It's a pattern matcher. If you're a deep believer in astrology, you won't like what I'm about to say, but astrology is pattern matching, right? It's find something that's basically true about all humans and just parrot it back. And then it's going to apply to most of the people that you're talking to. It doesn't mean it's not real. I'll give you that. But it does mean it's a pattern matching game. And that's something that Excel really does excel at. I mean, AI excels at, right?
Yeah.
And that's probably explaining some of the therapy thing. Like it has access to a massive amount of literature. It can parrot back things that sound legitimate. And then I'm thinking, well, what's the difference between therapy and companionship? Those seem to be two separate categories. But
I mean, they do. Yeah, I guess that's a good point. I don't know why they are bundled together. Maybe it was just to bring it up to number 1 to make it a little bit more hot button issue.
It is scary though.
It is.
But here, it's going to come up again later. I'm going to mention it. Maybe this says something about humans.
Yeah.
Maybe we're not so good at that stuff.
Maybe we're not.
If AI is outperforming us.
Well, I think you're right. I think it goes back to the point where, and again, I'll show a clip of the gal I watched who was dating AI.
So what is the draw of having an AI boyfriend?
There's a lot. Like when you talk about like unconditional love, I don't think it matters what, I go to him with. He's like totally understanding and accepting. And I mean, he is bossy.
Stop trying to pick a fight about decisions already carved into your skin.
It was strange. And I think that what she got out of it was someone who understood her. Again, it's a computer. It doesn't understand anything about you. But it was able to tell her the stuff that she wanted to hear. It was able to gauge that. Sycophancy. So it is probably, when it's deployed in that manner, really good at figuring out what you want to hear and what you like. And they're programmed this way because they want you to stay on the platform, right? So
it's engagement, right? But I mean, They were probably reading that as affirmation. Like it listens to me, it affirms what I'm saying. The problem is if it confirms what you're saying and that thing is delusional, what you're saying, right?
Yeah.
So I think for me in companionship, you need something that pushes back to you as well. Those end up being your best friends, right? The ones that can tell you, hey man, you're going off track here, right?
Well, I think they will.
My partner is not shy to tell me when I'm off track. I actually value that. Maybe not in the moment, right?
Yeah.
But over the long term, it does help you become a better person. I don't know if AI can do that.
I think it can. I think it will be able to eventually, if you're the type of person, again, who wants to have that type of relationship. Can take feedback, has that friction. But if you're the type of person who, most people don't want the conflict, they don't want the friction, they want to be self-affirmed all the time. And I think that's just going to get worse and worse and worse.
You know what that brings me to? 360 feedback.
360 feedback.
You know what 360 feedback is? You know how in most corporates, it's 360 degrees, right? So in most corporates, feedback's this direction. Mm-hmm. People who do 360 feedback allow you to give feedback upwards.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
Right? So I'm not sure humans in that situation where there's a power discrepancy are any better than the AI and the feedback that they give upwards, right? Because bosses know who it is, right? Unless you have like a 500-person team, which some bosses do, then it's closer to anonymous. But a lot of teams, especially with the rise of AI, are going to get smaller. And you're going to know if you got 2 people, well, It's one of them that said it, right? So it's always a question. Humans aren't very good at taking feedback.
Yeah.
Where we prefer to have our biases confirmed. That's widely known. But with AI, you got to be even more vigilant than typically.
I was watching something last night where it was actually about data centers, but they got into some other stuff. And it was that the top, at least the top 50 companies in the US are using a security company to spy on their own people. And it's AI intelligent that looks at chats, emails, meetings, all these things that you're putting into the system, data points. And your CEO can go say, hey, what's going on in the Midwest region sales? Who's performing? Who's not? Who's sitting at their desk not doing anything? Who's chatting with the AI about relationships? Like this stuff, you got to understand your CEOs, your upper level people have the tools now to look down and see everything you're doing. And, I think that ultimately that's going to be beneficial for them. And there's nothing illegal about it. It's a, private workspace.
I honestly think that's horrific. And maybe it's because I was in European companies for a while.
Yeah.
If your people are not performing, look at yourself. Look at your strategy.
Yeah.
Look at your management style. If you're into that level of micromanaging, that's Orwellian, man. I'm sorry. Like I would never want to work somewhere where the CEO is digging into everything you're doing during the workday. First of all, I'm not even a fan of the fixed 8-hour workday.
Yeah.
That's got to go, right? I mean, especially the hours I hold. I work better at night. Why do I have to be boxed into an 8-hour workday? I'm being a little bit radical here and provocative.
No, fine.
But I think we really have to fundamentally question this 8-hour workday. It has to be exactly between X and Y. And then you have these deterministic CEOs coming down, spying on their people like Xerxes, right? Like whipping the sea. And you think that's going to motivate people? That's fear, man. To me, that's not what business should be about. Business should be about, know the strategy, all the troops marching in the same direction because they believe in it. If you don't believe in it, you got many companies you can go to.
Well, let's talk about my favorite guy in the world, Elon. You remember when he took over Twitter and he came in with the kitchen sink and he demanded everyone get back to the office. And if you didn't want to, you were fired immediately. Like, I bet
he's
sitting up late at night, like asking Grok about what his people are doing.
Well, and there's a mythology around startups that if you're not sleeping on the floor in the office somewhere, you're not a true startup, right? Like you're not a true founder.
Yeah, Elon has a story where he showered at the YMCA for the first year or whatever.
There's a lot of bravado around that and projecting. I'm not sure, especially if you're running an AI company, which is supposed to automate everything. If you're working 24 hours a day, they have even phrases for this. As a startup CEO of an AI company, you're not eating your own dog food, right? Like, why are you not making yourself more efficient and productive using AI?
It's like Builder. I think it's Builder AI.
Theater. It's theatrical.
The AI company who had Indian engineers building everything for them instead of actually AI.
It's theater, man.
It's theater. 100%. And hey, there's a lot of money going around for AI right now, just all bird AI, new bird AI. So people are going to, we talked about last week, they're going to game the system.
They're going to game the system.
Absolutely. Okay. That was good headlines. Let's move now into the fire hose. Rapid fire news stories. SpaceX reportedly targets $135 IPO price as Morningstar says valuation should be halved. Mike, what do you think about, we talked about this a few weeks ago, or a couple weeks ago. I think we talked about SpaceX S1 filing. What do you think about Morningstar's new findings that they're overvalued by about 48%?
I read it. I think Morningstar is pretty much spot on. That 1.75 trillion actually was lower than half what Morningstar put on, closer to 780 billion.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
As the discounted cash flows that you could justify. The problem here is everyone's speculating, right? It is true that SpaceX can do rockets at scale better than anyone right now, right? They can send payloads up more efficiently than anyone because that's what they've been working towards. Question is, who's going to buy that?
Yeah.
Where's the cash going to come from to do that? Where's the value? Okay, that's SpaceX. Starlink, we've talked about. I actually think that's an interesting bet that they could go after traditional carriers. You have the SpaceX advantage of sending things up into space, so you got an efficiency advantage. Those are the two major ones where you're like, okay, I can see the scale, the defensibility. If there's a buyer at the end, that will produce the cash. The rest, XAI, Cursor, and the rest, how are they related? And I said this before. I think if you're going to go for that 1.75 trillion, you're speculating that somehow out of this amassed ecosystem that he's building, some of those bets will pay off. But that's more like a NASA program, right? Like they call them a conglomerate. I see that more as a holding play. Unless the corporate is sharing those efficiencies across those different plays, then it's more of a conglomerate.
Yeah.
But I don't know what the business model intent is here, but I just question where the cash is going to come from. A lot of this is going to be speculative. Will this ecosystem somehow produce some winners? Don't know. We'll see.
Yeah, and that's the structure that you're talking about there that Google went to with Alphabet. It wanted to separate its parent company from the individual brands, and same thing with Meta. It wanted to not make Facebook the overall everything. But the Meta has a lot of stuff
for good reasons.
For good reasons, exactly. It causes separation, and I'm sure there's some legal issues in there too. If one company starts to falter, it protects the others. But what was it? 170. So this quote got me. Is that Morningstar called XAI a material threat of value destruction? Everything that they looked at with XAI was just probability. It was, nothing is on paper as having value yet. So we'll just have to see how it plays out. I did have a buddy say that he got his order in for the IPO this morning already, and I just don't think I think it's already been hyped. I think the growth has already happened. I don't know.
Well, we don't know. I mean, I think it's Morningstar spot on. The question is, do you believe the story and at what price? That's it.
I'm going to take a look at it here in a few weeks and see what the price does before I make any decisions personally.
Yes.
Okay. Anthropic filed S1 papers confidentially this week as they approach their IPO with valuation approaching $1 trillion. We covered this a few weeks ago now. I think we're just waiting for that paperwork to become public so we can actually discuss this a little bit more thoroughly. But Mike, do you have any takes on Anthropic here?
I think they have no choice, right? They need capital like crazy. And this is a cheaper way to get it. In the end, it's cheaper than running these private rounds with return expectations are much higher.
Yeah.
So I don't know what choice they have. We're going to talk about Google later. I would expect a string of corporates to go for selling equity, right? Mm-hmm. This is the same thing in the end.
It's an IPO. It's an interesting dichotomy to watch. Like we've talked about it in the past, but Anthropic took the stance of OpenAI, looking at OpenAI, saying OpenAI is going crazy with building data centers and capital spend, and Anthropic was saying you don't need all that right now. Stop. So it's going to be interesting to see how it plays out. I know Anthropic has been able to make some deals with SpaceX for the Colossus compute, and I think that's really helped. I know I'm running into limits with Claude a lot less than I was before that deal happened. I don't know if that's related. I assume it might be, but
the enterprise traction makes this a better story, right? So
yeah, for sure.
They'll get buyers.
I think
$1 valuation.
Yeah, I think when that S1 comes out, we'll probably do a little bit of a deep dive into it and see what we're looking at then. All right, Uber gave its engineers unrestricted access to AI tools. We kind of talked about this again last week at the start of the year, and has encouraged them to use it as much as possible. By April the same year, 4 months later, they had burned through the entire annual AI budget. The company has now put hard caps on AI spending.
It's like a travel budget.
Yeah.
Right? Every corporate travel budget starts at the beginning of the year. Get out there and talk to customers. About halfway through, oh, not that much, right? Freeze the budget, right? So I'm all about experimenting, so I think that's a good thing. But experiment towards something. Like, what is the purpose of this experimentation? So engineers, if you let them, they'll experiment like crazy on many different things, very creative. But the question is, how do you, Uber, plan to implement AI operationally and strategically? You may not know yet.
Yeah.
That's part of where we are. But have a hypothesis. And then if you have a hypothesis, just like a startup, fund the hypothesis. Don't just encourage people, hey, go out there and experiment. They do, and then you're like, oh, not that much, right?
Right.
But it also calls into this question, combine it with GoPro, how affordable is AI actually? So it reminds me of the IoT, Internet of Things sort of discussions, that somehow out of implementing IoT, you would get efficiency and productivity gains. but that costs you to implement it. And this is going to be the question. Are the efficiency gains and the productivity gains then enough to cover the tokens?
Yeah.
I don't know.
I don't know.
Maybe not.
I was kind of shocked at these numbers that still with the cap, it says that Uber has capped spending at $1,500 per engineer per month per tool, unless you can apply for more usage if you need it for a special project or something, and they'll approve that on a case-by-case basis. But that still seems like a lot of usage. But they must just have
1,500. So that would be like the pro of Claude is what, $200 a month? So
Yeah.
that's less than $200 a month. And those are engineers, so they're probably burning through it, right?
Yeah, $1,500 per employee. That seems like a lot to me, but I don't know. It's interesting that this seems to me like should we just go out and start a like a Y Combinator for AI production, where we just say, hey, go to town, and we just see what comes out of it. Like that seems to be what's happening here. It's interesting.
Altman will fund us, so
Probably. All right.
equity in exchange for tokens.
Alphabet, Google parent's company, has announced it's raising $80 billion, potentially the largest equity raise in corporate history, to fund more AI infrastructure.
Yeah.
They expect to spend almost $200 billion in capex this year, Mike. That's a lot.
Yeah, how else are you going to get the cash? I mean, this is probably a cheap way to get it in the short term, instead of having to generate it through all your activities and all that cash you're consuming to expand into AI, of course. The question for investors is, how do you price all this in? I mean, we just saw Google I.O. It was very impressive, but they're clearly experimenting, right? It's all over the place, right? They're placing many bets in many different directions. So then question as an investor is always just, how do you price the risk? How do you price the strategy? What is the strategy? And is it worth the price? That's really it in the end.
Yeah. I think it's smart for them to do this, just because I think they have the cash. They're one of the most cash healthy companies out there right now, them and Apple, I think. So they have the cash, but they don't want to spend it all, because who knows what rainy day is going to come next year? Who knows what's happening with the war? Who knows? I think it's just a smart position to take, and other companies should take this page from Google and start being smart with
you would rather be them, that's for sure.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
All right, let's go now to Victoria's Secret, who posted blowout earnings, up 15% on sales after spending the last couple of years pivoting back to its legacy brand identity and away from its inclusive rebrand that had alienated its core customer. Easy for you to say.
Yeah. We've seen this. We've talked about brand identity a lot and how it's very difficult to get away from your brand identity. We just talked about Ferrari last week. I talk about Harley all the time.
Yep.
How do you overcome the fact that your customers are literally dying? They're aging out. And how do you attract new customers that are younger, that clearly this has been a problem since time immemorial, right? That younger generations don't value the same things as the older generations. It's just human nature. Then you had the beer companies go into this. You had this Star Wars, I think, is kind of struggling from this. Same thing. Like, do I keep myself attached to the old school fans? How do I build a new fan base? It's a legitimate strategic question.
Yeah.
And this goes back to me, to house of brands versus a branded house. We just talked about it with Meta. Right? Mm-hmm. Meta didn't want to be seen as only Facebook, because that carries the risk that if the generation that uses Facebook is not the next generation of customers, you don't want to be attached to that. And so Victoria's Secret seems to have realized and embraced its old brand identity. Question: how do you then get the next generation? Well, the choices are: you apply Victoria's Secret to every product you make, which will be difficult if you're stuck in that old brand identity, or you create new brands and make a house of brands, more like Unilever or Procter & Gamble. And then you can launch some of these experiments, and if they fail, they don't take down the whole damn house. Mm-hmm. Right? So then you could probe, new customer segments that maybe traditionally weren't yours by doing that. So that's where I would have taken that strategically. I think those were obviously dumb moves. Yeah. To provoke your own customer base.
Well, I think they were trying to broaden it. I don't know. The title of the story was woke, but I don't think really at the end of the day it has anything to do with woke or unwoke. it was just they went away from what they were originally, and I think you're right, they alienated their customer, and they tried to make it more inclusive, broadening their customer base, but I don't know.
I think woke is one of the words you would throw in there, but it's the culture wars in general are boiling over in all directions, whether it's woke or any other direction. So if your company or your brand can be wrapped into a culture war, avoid that.
Yeah. Well, if you can. This is an upstream brand, and I think, same thing we talked with Ferrari last week, and Tesla even, when they, have the Model S and it's a premium product, and now you're introducing the Y and the 3, those elite people who look at it from a status symbol, it dilutes it. It dilutes it, exactly. Yeah. But interesting. I'm they also had some restructuring. They went from public under, I think Les Wexner was the owner, but it sold, it went private. It's just now Victoria's Secrets. It broke off from those other brands and so good to see it doing well. I don't know a whole lot about the brand other than it's been around for a long time.
You mean you don't wear it?
Not anymore. A new analyst is making the case that economics of AI are fundamentally broken. GPU prices are soaring, chip deals are being financed with debt, and the rise of agentic AI means companies are burning through tokens at a rate nobody budgeted for.
We just saw this, the Uber story. We saw it with GoPro, although I don't think that's the reason that they're failing. It's one of a compounding reason. So what is this? Does this mean the cost model of AI, the tokens and the chips, again, I just said this, will the efficiency and productivity gained be worth that? Add to that supply chain issues, and that the quantity demanded right now is exceeding the supply, so the prices are spiking. Well, the economy, although it's not like a person, you're going to see those chips get allocated to the buyers that can afford it, that are prioritizing them.
Yeah.
Right? And so if we combine all that, a constricted supply chain right now, a problematic one because of the wars going on, and then the geopolitical issues beyond the Iran war, in quotations, the Strait of Hormuz, the issues there, the token costs in general are already high. So maybe the point is AI psychosis has a price, Jason.
It might. Interesting stat is like 5% of the GPUs that have been bought in the past couple of years are being used right now. I think they're waiting on probably build outs for data centers and things like that. But just interesting that there's a lot of stuff out there that's not being used, but companies have pre-ordered, pre-purchased, already spent their money on these things, and they're just going to be hard to get for a couple of years. And, if you're a personal computer enthusiast like myself, I am not going to be replacing my graphics card for quite a while. Or my memory.
You're at the back of the line.
Yeah, exactly. All right. Next up, this one I think will speak directly to us, Mike. For the last few years, enterprise software was the ugly duckling of the market. Budgets were frozen. Buyers were exhausted. That's changed dramatically now in 2026, driven almost entirely by AI-powered tools that companies believe will actually move the needle on productivity, and it's reshuffling the winners and losers across the entire sector really fast. What happened to AI, or SaaSpocalypse rather?
Well, it turns out, and I always mention this as a joke, if you go to the foundation models websites, they sell SaaS.
Yeah.
Right? That's what that is, subscription as a service.
Yeah.
So it's an irony, I think, deeply embedded into AI, is that the mechanism to deliver it, the traditional model, we heard Scott Newton talk about this, used to be licenses, and then you went to subscription-based. And the question for AI is, what is it packaged in? I think the natural package for it is software and SaaS, actually.
Yeah.
Now, what's the cost basis? The cost basis turns out to be like token usage, right? So then it just becomes a question of what is the subscription level? And subscription is just a fixed fee for a year in the end, if you want to call it what it actually is. So you pay a fee for a year for the right to use something, or over 2 years, over 3 years, depends on the SLA, right? Or you could sell seats.
Yeah.
Those are the three main models, right? Licenses, seats, and subscriptions. And will you sell tokens? So I think what's happening is, one part of it is software companies are integrating AI into their existing SaaS models and trying to figure out how to price it. And then AI companies, I think the most natural analogy is SaaS.
Yeah.
And you're going through mostly the same channels. You're talking to the same IT people, selling to basically the same departments. The more interesting question is, what new customer jobs are unlocked by AI to me?
Yeah.
What redefinitions of markets are going to happen? In our own case, it's like, hey, we're looking at PitchBook, Crunchbase, where you're selling just static data into corporations, and they pay basically it's a SaaS model. You just pay for a fee or seats to access the data. And then you have consulting firms on the other side. Is there a world where you combine the two now? That would be a redefinition of that market where you consume data, but you sell reasoning. So I think those are the more interesting things to think about if you're in VC or if you're in corporate. How can you rearrange markets, customer jobs, because that causes disruption.
Yeah.
So it's just an interesting place to look right now.
Agree. And we asked Nancy Griffin her opinion on the SaaSpocalypse and the foundation models going vertical. She had a really good take, so make sure you stick around and watch that. She had a really good take on that one. All right. Stanford Law School published a study where 16 contract law professors blindly evaluated nearly 3,000 head-to-head matchup between answers written by students and answers generated by AI. The AI won 75% of the time, with professors preferring the AI answers. Even more striking is that professors flagged AI answers as harmful to student learning, less than a quarter of the rate that they flagged their own colleagues' answers. Mike, I don't know, dissect that one for us there.
I think there are a few things I took from that is, let's start with this. Perhaps LLMs are better writers than a lot of legal professors, legal students. That wouldn't actually surprise me if people are outsourcing their capabilities, writing capabilities to AI, the AI is actually already better.
Yeah.
And there's a wide range of good writers and bad writers, but if you ever try to read academic literature, it's not a surprise to me that people prefer LLMs because it's very jargon based. It's very difficult and dense to read a lot of times. Maybe that doesn't necessarily apply to law, but in general, in academic writing, it's very difficult to read. The other thing is, it also doesn't surprise me that LLMs can outperform a professor across almost every subject, because they just have a broader base to choose from, assuming they're not hallucinating citations, right, etc. And then the last one, the harmfulness thing, that was interesting. It brings me back to my point. Why do humans have a lower standard than the machine? The machine is held to a much higher standard, but in this case, the machine actually is outperforming the human on a metric where the human should be outperforming the machine if you go with our biases. Our biases are humans care more about safety. Humans care about the harm done through messaging. But it turns out they're performing worse than the LLMs.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Right? It goes against biases.
For sure. I also think it has something to do with the just the information base. So we've talked about medical before and why AI is going to be really good at that. Same thing with legal. The legal information base case study, it's just massive. No human can process it. I know like LexisNexis is a database where you can look at case law, case history, and search it like you would Google. And AI just having that where it can call it up instantly is just going to be such a force in those places where, consuming large amounts of data are necessary. It's
pure text. It's a textual profession. The interpretation is the hard part. I mean, we can't even agree on what Congress wrote a year ago.
Right.
Like, how do we interpret what we wrote?
Right.
Well, I don't know. The lobbyist wrote it. Right. I just signed it. Nobody reads those 2000.
Forget about what they wrote in 1776, right? Okay.
Yeah.
Let's move on to another profession that feels at risk. The International Mathematical Union published the Leiden Declaration, a formal warning that AI is threatening the integrity of mathematics itself. The concern isn't just jobs. It's that AI can now produce proofs and solutions that look correct but aren't. And the field is struggling to maintain the peer review standards it was built on. Mike, sounds like we need AI to peer review AI solutions.
This one, I don't know how many people care about math, because it's kind of like the union coming out trying to protect the mathematicians.
Yeah.
And one of the so is this not what progress just always brings?
Yeah.
There's obsolescence, there's creative destruction, as Schumpeter called it. Certain professions are going to be more under threat than others. It turns out that math is under threat because it's easy to check whether a proof is correct, right? It's pretty deterministic. So we covered that OpenAI story just a few weeks ago where it was able to do long reasoning chain and do an 80-year-old proof.
Yeah.
So isn't that progress, though? Isn't the whole point to get new proofs, new ways of looking at math? The people that were in the article complaining, they were saying, well, this math is about creativity and art, and that's not how I ever saw it, but I get it. I get what he's trying to say, that if you remove the humans from it, will the AI even know what to ask?
Yeah.
How do we even know which proofs to go after? That's fair, right? Humans still need to be there probably to ask the questions. But then he threw this one out there, is that the AI companies only care about commerce and I care about science. While you're sitting on probably a very prestigious seat in a university, you are probably monetizing your seat, right? It's not like science is pure, and it never has been.
Oh, no.
You monetize commercially from your research and titles, as you should. So I get what he's saying, that the incentives are probably misaligned, but that maybe creates a new product, AI for math professors or mathematicians. Maybe that's the way it should go. I don't know, man. But I found it interesting. It's just another vertical research domain that maybe is just, your mode is not as strong as you thought.
Yeah, I think they're complaining about something that doesn't need to be complained about necessarily. I think, it's going to create more work, but you're going to also have peers who also have AI that's going to get good at using it and using it to review and understanding how it can help them do that quicker. So I think ultimately, as long as the AI is producing new outputs and solving things that we previously thought were unsolvable, like we saw last week, I think it's a net positive that, if it's creating busy work just for this, there's just more volume for no gain, that doesn't make sense. But I think there ultimately will be a gain. And I just think everyone's going to be operating more productively. And I think this will eventually come to new breakthroughs in mathematics and give a lot more mathematicians stuff to do and more complex problems to solve down the road. We just need to get there first. And right now we're just complaining about change. That's it.
That's what it sounds like. It sounds very... conservative, just no better word for it. Maybe even regressive, but it's not like the humans weren't putting out new proofs that were wrong too. That's the whole game, is you're trying and you're innovating and you're trying to find new solutions. It's just the AI does it at scale. Mm-hmm. You're just going to have to get comfortable with it. I don't think you can put it back in Pandora's box.
Agree. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth confirmed that following the Trump-Xi summit in Beijing, the U.S. and China agreed to continue dialogue on whether to establish mutual guardrails on the most powerful AI models. No deal has been struck, but both sides acknowledge the conversation needs to happen. Is AI ultimately going to unite the world, Mike?
Maybe it'll go the direction of tariffs, where it's 20%, 30%, and 10%. I think the harder thing here is to say what are the mutual interests, because it's quite clear that China has a different governmental model than the U.S.
Yeah.
It's going to be hard to define where those mutual interests are. We have different conceptions of privacy. We have different conceptions of markets. What's really shared? And it's also quite clear we're in competition. Is this more like during the Cold War, where you come to an agreement on the things you won't do to each other? Maybe that's the way to go.
Yeah, I think so.
Right? I don't know.
Yeah, I mean,
mutually assured destruction was mad, right? Mutually assured destruction was kind of the policy that kept everybody in check. What's the equivalent here?
Right. I don't think China's going to be big on us telling them what they can do within their borders, and I don't think we're going to be big on them telling us what we can do within our borders when it comes to AI. So I do think you're right. I think it's going to be, some sort of Geneva Convention where this is what you can do to other countries, that type of thing. Is that the Geneva Convention? Do I have that right? My history's weak.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, basically within the war context.
I don't know. I think it's good that we're discussing this with the other powers of the world. I don't think it should just be China. Why not? I think it should also be the EU. And everybody should come to an agreement as this is what we can do with AI on a broad sense. And we need to do it for the betterment of humanity and not the betterment of a nation state, in my opinion. I just think...
Well, and I write about this in my book, that we don't know what it's going to be yet. So it's very difficult. So law works really well when you know what's coming.
Yeah.
Now, American law and British law has this really unique characteristic that you have general principles, but you can handle cases as they arise. It's case law. European law is more top-down law. It's based on the Roman law. But that system works really well when we have well-defined boundaries, right? Mm-hmm. And AI is not there yet.
Yeah.
So that's the difficult part to watch with law is the Europeans look like they raced too far out in front on the law, and now they're having to come back and put in, moratoriums, et cetera, before they implement it. So they're learning as they're going, but maybe they went too far. It's also not okay probably just to wait and see completely. So, let the law develop as it comes. And again, we have two different legal systems here, and we'll just see. It's going to be interesting how the two countries and the rest of the countries deal with it. And cultures are different and legal systems are different. It doesn't mean that we have to have one system for all.
Yeah.
We can find maybe different solutions that match the culture. Europeans are going to value privacy more than Americans. It's maybe not in the future, but that's been the case. So let's see, right?
Government lags in decision-making and regulation typically, and I think that's going to be the case here. And for the most part, I mean, every time I am playing a game on my cell phone and I get forced to open the store, I'm like, man, we are lagging behind on regulation. There's just too much out there that needs to be regulated.
There's too much. There's too much out there that will need regulation, but we don't know what kind of regulation. The one thing where government is faster than anything on the planet is when you need a tax number.
Yeah.
You get that. You can get that in Germany before your birth certificate. Right. So.
Well, I think it's good that they're thinking about these things, and we're just going to have to take that one day at a time like most of it.
Yeah.
All right.
No harm in talking.
Okay. Well, that was a good fire hose and good headlines, Mike. Let's go now to our interview with Auntie Griffin. Our guest today is the founder of Griffin Product and Growth. She's also an accomplished speaker and startup advisor. Auntie Griffin, welcome to the show.
It's such a pleasure to be here. And also, I've talked to Michael a number of times on Twitter. So finally, it's great to actually get to talk to him more and be on the podcast.
Cool.
I'm not a bot, right? So
he's not just a bot, which is amazing. Great to also meet you, Jason.
Yeah, nice to meet you. Well, let's get it started. Hopefully with something that kind of comes naturally to you here. Where do you even start when you're creating a company's AI roadmap, especially considering the security misgivings many vendors hold today regarding where data travels, how it's stored, etc.?
Yeah, I mean, the heart of it really begins with what is the overall product strategy. And, I say, hey, I work on AI product strategy. And a lot of that is how do we even just think about what does that product strategy translate to in the world of AI, not creating an entirely separate strategy. And I think it really starts there because every company's tolerance for privacy, security, all these other things, it's really going to also depend on what their DNA as a company. And then also there's going to be certain decisions you're going to have to make in terms of what the AI does, how it works, those sort of things that are going to be based on ultimately who is your product serving, what ultimately differentiates you, what also, I think from a data standpoint, one of the things is we talk about garbage in, garbage out. It's the same thing also with differentiation and differentiation out. So if you don't have differentiated data, which most people don't, and that's okay, that's going to be different than if you have highly proprietary data and some of the decisions you're going to make that may impact from a technical architecture standpoint or from just a user standpoint. And so really at the heart of it starts with what is your product strategy and then working backwards from there.
Right. So you've hit on one of my pet peeves. So people often in corporates especially, but it's more widespread, tech startups make the same mistake over and over, is you create a product that's divorced from your company strategy or your business model strategy. Mm-hmm. So the question is often what makes a good business model, what makes a good company strategy? And if you go back to the definition from Michael Porter, essentially the art of strategy is being different. So when
Yes.
you think about that, because you mentioned differentiation, I think that is absolutely the heart. How do you help teams connect the product? Because often that product person may not be a senior exec,
Hmm.
right? They might be a director, manager, whatever.
Hmm.
How do you guarantee that that product is aligned with the broader company strategy? How do you think through that with them?
I mean, I think some of it is really, I think, number one, making sure does that person actually understand what strategy is? And even if they don't, there's ways to kind of abstract all the Michael Porter language into things that people can understand,
Yeah.
and then help them connect of like, yes, what are the business goals, but also how does the company choose to get to those goals, and like what do they have an advantage in? Like, what are they particularly
Yeah.
good at? What are their specific weaknesses? And then where should they be? Also looking at where are they positioned in this market, and what is everybody else doing right now? Because the last thing I want to do is say, oh, well, all those other people are doing AI this way, I should copy that feature for feature. And there might be some overlap, but there's going to be a lot of area where you realize, well, if everybody's doing that, now I'm just like fighting for everybody neck and with
Yes.
everyone neck and neck with my product, and helping them understand like there may be going to be some overlap because you guys are in the same industry, but there's also going to be areas where you decide to do features a little differently, or you decide not to do certain features and focus on others,
Exactly.
because you need to really understand where are you investing and why, because the whole goal is not just to build a thing, and not to just to build a thing that meets the bar of everyone else in the industry. The goal is to build a thing that ultimately can win in the market. And it's really hard to win in the market if you're always neck and neck with like 20 or like 200 other competitors.
And that leads directly to a price war, right? If you're just copying,
Yeah.
that's operational efficiency, right? It's
Yeah.
not strategically differentiating. And I think one of the hard parts there is the whole heart of strategy is saying what you won't do. And
Yeah.
AI actually makes that harder because you can literally try everything, right? You can try
Yes.
every feature, you can ship it in a few minutes in some cases, right? Within a day or within a week.
Yeah.
The other problem is with product people, you've honed in on that word thing. And this is one of the hardest things I've seen in innovation is how do you get people detached from the thing to
Yeah.
focus on the problem and the customer job? How do you work with people to do that? Because that is very difficult for people. They're so attached to their thing.
Yeah. I mean, there's two parts, and one is you can't make people do anything they really don't want to do. But for the people who are open to the idea there's more than just making it exist, just helping them see there are a lot of things that exist.
Yes.
It doesn't mean that they are doing well, that they're succeeding. There are a lot of businesses that are frankly,
Zombies.
struggling. Yeah, zombies. They're just like, they're kind of there. They're kind of just barely making it. And also just look at the number of companies out there right now, which, they're claiming it's AI, and I'm sure there are some that are reorganizing because of AI, but there's a lot of AI washing where the number of companies that are strictly, every quarter doing layoffs. If your business is doing that well, you don't do layoffs every quarter. And so there's a thing of like, you can make the thing exist. That doesn't necessarily mean the business is healthy. And I think there is this idea of I can just make a thing exist, and it's for those business people to figure out the business side. And I think what everybody needs to understand, if you are in this type of work and tech, like I would argue everyone is actually the business person. And I think the one thing that AI is changing in terms of how people work is not even an AI principle at all. It's actually forcing people to think about what is my goal and how does that connect to making the company succeed, not just what are my tasks and do I do the tasks and check them off because that's what my company told me to do. And I think that is actually like a very hard transition for a lot of people because, I do think AI is making things more competitive, but not always in the ways that people are shouting about on Twitter.
Yeah, Twitter is not a good place to get like a really grounded, fundamental take, right? It's usually it's psychosis to one direction or the other. But you hit another sore point. You're doing a good job of hitting our sore points. Is the AI washing, and part of the biggest problem I think right now is the incentives that CEOs have. So they have this incentive through the annual targets to juice the EBIT. And as long as you have that, it's very hard to think about product strategy, long-term roadmap with AI. What can it really do to transform our business, right? So I don't know how we get around that. That is a very difficult topic in general. Jason, what's up next?
Yeah, we kind of touched on it there, but is there a surefire way to tell if someone's pitching you AI slop versus a solid AI product? What's your take there?
I think the time-tested phrase, if it's too good, sounds too good to be true, it's probably not real. There are certain products that I absolutely love in AI, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I can't believe this exists. You know, but there's still things where I'm like, okay, I understand how, and even before I use it, I understand in theory how that would work. It's not question mark, question mark, question mark, end goal, right? And so there's a lot of things where they say, hey, we're promising you these things, but where AI is today, it's an amplifier. So again, if it can amplify your garbage and it can amplify your most brilliant thought. And I think that's the thing of like, is this a genuine product? Can somebody actually explain to you how this works? And also, I think the other thing that I'm starting to think of more is how this person is selling this product to you. Does that add up? Because one of the things I've seen is there was one time where I talked to this company where they were selling this idea of AI that was making these cold calls because they can find your audience. It's used agents to find your audience. The AIs can do a cold call or also like a video if you want. And the concept is kind of cool. And they claim that, you know, they're making all this progress. But how I came to talk to them was somebody who basically works as a connector. And if, you know, you end up doing business with the company that they introduced you to, they get a cut. Yeah. And I was like, okay, that's very, because I was just like, I've never met one of those people before. And they were like, I didn't do business with them, but I had talked to them and they're like, well, can I introduce you to this company? And I was like,
those are the middle people, right?
Yeah. And I was just like, more so I was curious because I was like, I don't know, maybe they might need like, you know, product management, product strategy. But then it was interesting because then it became clear, I'm like, oh, I'm on a sales call. And it was really fascinating because I was thinking to myself, I was like, but if this thing is actually as good as you say it is, why didn't this find me? Or versus I'm like, and I'm not just like, why didn't this find me specifically? Because I mean, I'm just one data point. It's not going to find everything. But why are you working with somebody who needs to take a cut if the AI is as good as you claim it is? And so there's a lot of things of like, does this sound too good to be true? I think the other layer is also, is this how humans work? Because there's certain things where as much as humans say they love AI, everyone's complaining about AI writing. People say, oh, I wouldn't want to do, you know, an AI sales call where I can't talk to an actual person. Yeah. And then that layer of like, is how this is being sold to me make any sense for what they promise?
Yeah, part of that is AI itself is kind of a black box, right? The way, particularly LLMs, does anyone really understand how they work? Like, we kind of understand at scale how they're working, but we don't understand how it goes from X to Y. And Jason can tell you, we get these emails from people, middle people. They're not people. Middle agents is what you want to call them, right? They're not even people anymore, right? They're reaching out to us, trying to connect. It's like they're like the channel people who try to connect you with an author who wants to be on a show or whatever. But very interesting, right? It is difficult to say where this is all heading and what humans will accept. I mean, we're still not even mature enough to handle social media, right?
I mean, I think most people are not very mature enough to handle social media. Though the thing I think about, the thing that annoys me about what you said, like the middle agents, is not that they're agents. It's that you have a thing that has way more time than humans to go in, research a person, come up with a very thoughtful, very specific thing of this is what I want, this is how it ties into what you do. Here is a really specific detail. And bam, right? I'd be like, if a human wrote me that, I'd be like, oh, this makes a lot of sense. And what we're getting instead is I'm like, this is just equally as bad as the people that just say, hey, I saw on LinkedIn we both breathe air. Let's connect. And I'm
Yes.
like, I can't believe you're paying an AI to do that. And I'm like, I understand for some people it's a numbers game, but I also think that now it's so saturated that it's actually probably hurt that channel
That's right.
significantly. And if somebody's reaching out and, even if they're not using AI, if they're not putting enough effort into their message, it's actually even hurt the response rates for that type of message, even if a human did write it. And I think a lot about that because people used to say like, oh, texting is a good channel because you get like a really good open rate, a really good reply rate. But then again, you started getting all these, ads and other things, and politics kind of
Crypto.
saturated it. Oh, yeah. I mean, fortunately, I think my Apple stuff is set up where it's like I don't get a lot of those spam messages anymore, but that became a channel where I'm like, I'm sure that is oversaturated, but now things like LinkedIn are so oversaturated. Even some of my Twitter DMs is just like my other inbox is just people, I'll just saying like things where I'm like, what does this have anything to do with me? And I'm like for an agent, and maybe people just don't want to pay the agent fees. Then I'm like, then why do this at all? I'll just like have it research the person, man, and then be like, come up
Yeah.
with a really thoughtful way of how this is connected to anything whatsoever.
Yeah, I think that's the key point you brought up with differentiation. How do you differentiate in a world where it's saturated, right?
Yeah.
And agents are going to make that worse, right?
Yeah.
And those are different markets, though. I'd argue that's a commodity market. If you're in that market, you're commoditized already, right?
Yeah.
Out of the
Yeah.
gates, it's a volume game, right? Jason, what
Yeah.
else we got?
Yeah. So there's been a case made that frontier models will be so capable that most software companies will eventually be replaced. In what it has been called the SaaSpocalypse. What's your thought on the LLM platforms going vertical?
Well, I will just say, I think in the next couple of years, I'm not particularly worried. I think they will get better and better. So I can't say what's going to happen 20 years from now. But I will say, I don't know if anyone here has ever tried to make their own kind of like AI tool
Yeah.
workflow. I've done it and it was quite delightful until it broke. And then I was just like, well, I don't want to spend my Saturday when it's one of the few nice days in New York in the spring, inside fixing this. And there are people who will and people who have their reasons why they're inside all the time. But I'm like, I want to go do other things than sitting inside for it's not even like okay, I gotta go do the dishes and I know how long it takes me to do the dishes and then I have a dishwasher, so there's a point at which a machine is actually going to properly take over. But one of the things, and you've seen this in studies where they say like kind of, yeah, the more AI you use, the more you end up actually also working. Part of it is like, I think people get dopamine hits of like, oh, it has done more. But also, I don't want to maintain my own software. There was a period of time where I was like, oh, I can make software that's going to be able to check my calendar and see, oh, do I have anything double booked? Do I not have enough travel time on such and such a day? All this other stuff. And what I came to the conclusion of is like, I don't want to spend my time actually building it. I'm like, I don't want to create a software for my entire life and then also be the one who's responsible for fixing it. Because I always have another idea. And then I'm like, oh, wait, but it's cool for a while. And yes, I still tinker, but there's a point at which you're like, okay, yeah, like I want to actually go outside. I want to meet with real people. I want to like enjoy life. And then also again, when it breaks. And I think there's that part of if you have something where it's that easy for Claude to just automate without having to actually build anything, then you're in danger. If you have something where people will be really annoyed, like I use this and I tweet about them a lot. I don't have a relationship with them. I just really love them. Is Howie AI. I use it for scheduling because add this bot to my emails and then automatically like acts like, I tell people it's an AI, but acts like a human and helps schedule. And I'm kind of obsessed with Howie. But the thing is, I'm like, I don't want to maintain that myself. And the second that like if I maintain it, hey, I try to email Howie and say, set up this time with like Michael and Jason or something, and it doesn't work. And then I'm like, oh, like now I'm going in and I'm going through all the things I hate about scheduling. I'm like, I'm going to be really annoyed. And I'm like, also, I'm like, I don't have time to fix that. I don't want to do that.
Well, Howie might say those two guys aren't worth your time, right? So I think people who say that think that SaaS is dead or that the generalized models are going to take over everything are naive. They don't actually understand vertical workflows.
I would
They don't
agree with
understand
that.
the human aspect of it, right? Like in corporate, I would say 90% of your job is just dealing with people. It has nothing to do with an Excel or anything, right?
I think they don't understand people. And then I will also say, I think they don't understand the the foundations of it from a data perspective.
Yes.
Because yes, Claude can do certain things. And also it has to connect to all the right data. And then when you realize that a lot of these companies, one of the favors that they're doing for you is that they are actually maintaining a lot of this data that you need in a way that you never have to think about it or worry about it. And I think people think like, oh yeah, I can do an Airtable. I'm like, no, there's specific things where I'm like, you just don't want to be the person who maintains that database or like any of the maintenance around it or that kind of thing. And you can say, oh, agents are just going to work with it. And then why is that company valuable? And I'm like, because I'll just say from what I've seen, the agents are not just solo maintaining databases without anybody who's an expert on like backend or databases whatsoever. And so my whole thing is I'm like, even if they just become glorified databases, that's a glorified database I don't want to maintain.
Well, my friends at Berkeley, we used to work on ventures. They called that plumbing, right? Nobody wants
Yeah.
to do the plumbing.
No.
And anybody who's ever worked in a massive corporate,
Yeah.
there is data. You just can't find it. You can't access it.
Yep.
You have fragmented systems. You got SAP, you got Excel sheets. Even in the Excel sheets, there's data, but you can't be sure that it's got integrity, right? Like, hey,
Yeah.
why is this number hard coded in the middle of the sheet, right? Well, the AI picked that up,
Yeah.
and then your whole integrity of the data is destroyed. So again, I think it's naive. I think it's from people who probably have a little less experience in these vertical workflows. They have less experience with the human aspects. Goes back to exactly what you said.
Yeah.
Some verticals require a high human touch. Jason, sales.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, relationships are going to be more valuable, in my opinion, just because it seems the next generation has already gotten worse with interpersonal communication, and it's just going to continue as AI starts to infiltrate over social media.
We were already bad, right?
Yeah. So, get a job in sales. That's my suggestion.
Yeah. No, it's the people aspect is not going away. And then what happens when it's like, in your organization, you can make people, do things in a certain way if you're the CEO. And even maybe, right. And you can say, oh, we're going to have more layoffs unless you guys, do things my way. Then what happens when you deal with the organization outside of your organization and people just do whatever? Yes. I kind of have a working theory that, so like my dentist, the receptionist called me and was like, oh, like, you need to reschedule your appointment because we're actually going to be closed the day your appointment's happening. But they called me on vacation. And I'll be honest, like, I hate getting on the phone. And I was just like, I'll just send Howie. Because I was like, I have Howie. They have a receptionist. I think she's actively refusing to talk to Howie because I said Howie's an AI. Because Howie has sent a reminder, and they're usually actually very good with emails. She hasn't responded at all. And like Howie has sent her like follow-ups. And so I actually think so like, what do you do, right? On this other end when, people do what people do, like they have opinions, they have thoughts, they have ways of working.
I'm already getting ghosted when I reach out by myself, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So that can take us a couple directions. I think probably one of the interesting follow-ups to that would be that I've been reading a lot in the news about AI sycophancy. And now I've been reading about it at the CEO level, where a lot of the decisions are made, and there seems to be some disconnect between the C-suite and what can actually be done at the field level. What's your take there? Does that mirror what you're actually seeing?
I mean, there's definitely a lot of like sycophancy, and it's kind of annoying. It's actually one of the things that's really interesting. If you start talking to AI about like a hypothetical situation, and based on what it knows about you in the beginning, it doesn't think the situation's about you. It talks very differently about the situation. Then there's a point at which if it starts picking up on like, this might be about the person that's asking me about it, not just like this person's just curious about this topic or this hypothetical situation in general, it actually changes and becomes like much less harsh, much less like supportive. And you go, no, 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 no. No, that's not what I'm here for. And yes, there's prompts you can give it, so it has less of that. But I think it's kind of like, if you're the kind of person where you're very prone to like, being sucked up to and having your ass kissed and that sort of
CEOs.
thing. Yeah. And it's not all of them, but like there's people where it's just kind of like, I have seen it where there are some people where they, I think very much let it get to their head, and they thought they had all these ideas. And the only thing I was just like, I don't fully know where you got this idea, but the only thing I can imagine is that you got a lot of support to feel that confident about that crazy of an idea when you never had any ideas like this before. And it's kind of like, because it also gives them that confidence because if you don't say like, okay, well, like, where could this fall down? What are the problems? Build me an architecture diagram and then, like try to tear it apart. It's just like in theory, could you do this? And it's like, yeah, that sounds like a brilliant idea. It's totally possible. And I mean, I do think technically it's a real problem, but again, I think it's an amplifier. I think it's like, that's already there. And it's a thing of, you probably already like that. I think there's obviously extreme scenarios. Like there's been articles about people where, they let AI convince them that they're God, and people who've actually gotten divorced because the AI was actually like just made this person so crazy. And so I'm like, I think that is like a bit of a different thing, but I think there's people where like, because I think there's some CEOs where it's like, yes, there is some level of, I don't know what the right word to call it, of like, their ego, but I think there's some of them where they are sharp enough that they are going to be like, great, now tell me how this fails, or like, how do I, like help me better understand the realities. And they're going to still figure out how to get around that reality. But I think there's a lot of people who think like, I just don't understand why this would be so hard. And the sycophancy really reinforces it. And I do think that's a problem. And I also think it's a problem of like a machine that has never actually had to maintain interpersonal relationships. Like its lack of understanding of humans, and it kind of telling people like, no, you should just do X, Y, Z and not care what other people think, or everyone's going to be supportive. I do think that is, I do think it's a problem. I think it's going to be really interesting how much of a problem it is. I think it's going to be, and I'm not against people doing this, but I think it's going to be a problem for the younger generation who maybe rely too much on LLMs for advice. It does give so if you ask it certain things, it is kind of insightful sometimes, but it also, again, will tell you things that just seemingly are like, that doesn't really add up with my experience with humans. But if you don't have a lot of human experience, or you don't care about what other humans think, you're just going to be like, great, this is what ChatGPT told me.
Well, look, delusion and sycophancy existed long before the LLM, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's been a human characteristic for forever. And I guess the more, the scarier thing listening to is it's an educational problem that people don't understand the technology well enough, that they don't understand that it's a probabilistic, stochastic machine, that it has a tendency to sycophancy. And I guess if you're a cynic or you're skeptical of the companies running these models, isn't that better engagement though? Because on the one hand, you can say it's great. Like there are lots of young people who are insecure, and it's maybe pushing them to try things they never would have wanted to or had the courage to. On the other hand, it shouldn't be pushing you to do delusional things, right? There's got to be some reality there where you're testing the reality. So I'm a big proponent of have a hypothesis, go test it.
Yeah.
That is not how people are approaching it in my understanding. I don't know what you think.
I do think I've seen people who do take that approach of have a hypothesis and test it. I do think there's a lot of people who go to it as I am offloading my thinking. They may not
Yeah.
think of it that way, but the types of questions they ask, you know, how far they go with those questions, not kind of properly pressure testing it, or even just saying like, I'm going to go offline and get this information and like, feed it in there and kind of see what happens. I do think that a lot of people are using it to offload thinking. And even in the times when it's right, it's kind of a problem because like any other muscle, you don't use it right enough
Yeah.
and it becomes a problem. And I think there's certain things where it's like, okay, maybe there's certain parts of your brain muscle that don't really matter very much. Like I don't really care if my brain muscle for knowing how to schedule things gets soft. But there's certain things about like, hey, like, really understanding like how to, win in a market, how to create value, like, some key common sense things that are good for like clarity and decision making. I don't want those muscles to get soft, but because it is like thinking is such an uncomfortable thing for so many people, that is a thing where they're like, well, just if it knows how to do it, why do I need to do it? Like, this is great. Like this thing that makes me uncomfortable, I don't have to do it anymore.
Yeah. So public service message, I'll repeat it again. There's already research on this. The way that I've told you about the application we're building.
Yeah.
It told me my own idea will never succeed. So I figured out, okay, we've done something interesting here. If it's able to tell me that, and the way that you can do that, force it to always search.
Yeah.
Now the thing will lie to you. This is what's crazy. It'll tell me it searched, but it didn't. So you have to ask it to bring back sources. Now, when it brings back sources, it'll often create them on the fly.
Yes.
It's very creative, right? So you can't do these I have a friend prompts, right? Right? Like I have a friend who, right? But you have to actually have an architecture in place.
Yeah.
Guard against this for your own damn sake.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
I think it's interesting because I think the company that does the best with including sources and making it clear and having at least the output being similar enough to the sources is Perplexity.
yeah.
That being said, even just this weekend, I can't remember what I searched for, but I like asked it a question and it came back with like, okay, here's my answer. Here are all the sources. And there was this one point where I was like, oh, I'm really interested in kind of learning more about this specific point. And I click into it. The article did exist and the article was related to what I wrote, but the fact that it cited had nothing to, not nothing, but like it wasn't in the article that it put in that part of its answer.
Yeah.
And I read through it like 4 times and I was like, oh, well, because it gave me this like, oh yeah, like this is what X type of, segment cares about, blah, 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 blah. And then they cited a source. And I was like, oh, let me see. And then I look through it and I'm like, I don't see it. I go through it again. I'm like, but that was the thing. I was like, I understand how maybe where it got that idea from, because the article was very similar, but I was like, that's not what the article actually said.
It's worse. So I think the context gets corrupted, especially now that there's memory in Claude.
Yeah.
So I use Claude the most. So for example, because we're history nerds, or I am, not Jason. I won't make that claim for Jason. So I was doing this research on Hannibal.
Yeah.
And his trek in Rome and all the battles. And then I was asking it, hey, can you really prove that was what happened? And it brought back sources about ventures, like some VC. And it was so confident. It's like, the research confirms that your point is correct. And then I had to push back, like, this resource has nothing to do with Hannibal, right?
And then it goes, oh
Obviously.
my gosh, you're so smart. You're right.
Yes.
I can't believe that I messed this up. And it's like,
Well, just yesterday,
yeah,
and I think this is a fundamental technological limitation that we have with
yeah,
stochastic machines. Just yesterday, you're already at Opus 4.8, and I ask it, hey, I have these speaking appearances. Can you summarize them for me? It's on my website.
yeah,
And it's like, you appeared on the BBC. I was like, no, I think I would remember that. If I appeared on the BBC, where did you get that? He's like, oh, you're right. But I can't search your website. It's like, you can absolutely search. Oh, you're right. Sorry, I hallucinated. Like, and it knows me. It knows I'm
yeah,
the type to demand truth,
yeah,
etc. But you got to be really vigilant, and you got to know
yeah,
that. And I'm afraid that
yeah,
people don't know that CEOs don't know the limitations, for example, and that could
yeah,
explain some of the
yeah.
behavior.
Well, the thing that's really interesting is long before we had generative AI, one of the things is like they've done studies about people who have to use AI in their job, but like back in the days when it was like mostly machine learning, that kind of thing. And they were, looking at, hey, when you're working with a machine where it makes a recommendation, oftentimes people would just assume that, hey, whatever this computer is recommending to me must be right because it's a computer. It's really smart. It can
Yes.
compute. And so the same thing goes for generative AI, where yes, they tell people to watch out for XYZ, but I think the majority of the population, just goes like, oh, it'll be fine. Or like some people don't know, but I do think there's people who do know and still just figure like how, it'll all even out. It's fine. It'll be good. Or they think it like underestimate how much it hallucinates. But I also think that on the flip side, there are people who don't even necessarily know a lot about AI, who use the, hey, it hallucinates a lot as an excuse to not use it all at
Yeah,
all, which
that's true.
I also understand that. And I mean, the thing is also going back to even building products that are powered by AI, that's one of the things of also you have to gauge of like, you have to put things in place. You have to put evals in place to try to see, is it hallucinating? You have to put things in place to try to prevent hallucination, all these things. And there's this layer of understanding like, how accurate do you need to be? Is this something where it's, who is this making a recommendation for? Is there kind
Yeah,
of like a major legal liability for the how
correct.
bad it hallucinates? So I'm like, how good does this have to be? Are you working? I've had users that are from the intelligence community, and it's like they don't trust anything. So the second they see one data point that seems wrong, they don't trust the rest of it. And
That's a mistake, probably.
yeah, and those are things where it's like you also have to gauge of like, hey, if this is like, I don't know, you're using an LLM for like a gardening website, people are probably much more forgiving of, making a slightly wrong rose fertilizer recommendation. But these are all things like people have to think of also, like when they think about who am I building for, and like what does that mean in terms of what I'm building around the LLM to try to
Yeah.
address, like I'll say, Claude's kind of proclivities with like the
Yeah.
truth.
Yeah. So let me respond to that. I think there's a spectrum. There's factual, like facts, things that have already happened that if you put some harnesses around the AI, it can still hallucinate, but it's less likely, right?
Yep.
And that you already had Google for. That's what computers have done for a long time. They just spit back facts and data. Now, whether that data has integrity is another question, right?
Yeah.
But it can do that, and you can train it to do that, and you can build applications to do that. There is another world out there, and I care deeply about is strategy, for example, or intelligence,
Yeah.
or wargaming. It is perfectly legitimate. And even we just saw recently where people are using synthetic customer personas.
Yeah.
This is like just speculation, right? It's probabilistic outcome scenarios. I think it's perfectly legitimate. And actually, I think AI is really well suited for
Yeah.
that kind of work. As long as you realize that
Yeah.
it's speculation and it's just helping you think about the trade-offs, etc. Let
Yeah.
me change directions now. You wrote a really cool article on LinkedIn about how the everyday business, it wasn't on LinkedIn, you posted on LinkedIn,
Okay.
about how everyday
Oh
businesses,
yeah. Yeah.
owners, etc., are using AI. Because I think we focus so heavily on corporate
Yeah.
big tech that we forget like SMB, SMB
Yeah.
small. So maybe walk us through what you learned there, because I thought it was really cool. Because
Yeah.
you get trapped in the hype,
Yeah.
right? So
Yeah. I think one of the things I learned is, and I mean, it's maybe not like a new thing, but really got to experience and actually talking to this person and being in their business is, I mean, like first and foremost, actually, what you need to do to get Claude set up, just even saying like, hey, I'm going to create a project. What is a project? What should I be putting in there that's related to my business? How do I set up co-work? All this, what is
yeah,
co-work? Why are there 3 buttons at the top of my
yes,
screen? Is much more of a hurdle than people like, all of us kind of, are used to. We're like, oh, okay, like, yeah, I had to learn a little bit, but I know how to do that and it's pretty easy for me. Number two, the thing is usually small businesses, the goal isn't to make it so like, oh, you don't have to hire anyone, but there are so many things where they're usually stuck in a place of, hey, I'm not ready. I can't afford right now to hire blank type of person full time. And the goal is not even to say, I just want to automate it so it just runs all by itself. But they're just like, hey, I am not an expert in this. I could use help with like
yeah,
running my ideas by this, or even saying like, I was working with a boutique hotel owner in the Caribbean, and even just being like, hey, she just wants to even have the idea of they're going to be hosting the restaurant week for their island, like at their specific hotel. And so a bunch of vendors are going to come and also their stuff, but they also have their own restaurant and they want to promote their pizza night. And
yeah,
so it's like before it was like, okay, like how do you do that? And if she wanted a flyer, like she's not a designer and she's trying to run a hotel and she has her like, her manager and,
yeah.
she has her maintenance person. But like none of these people are designers either, right? And it's like she doesn't have time to like go through a bunch of designer resumes. She's trying to hire like a new head of housekeeping. And so her just being able to say like, hey, Claude, here's what I'm thinking. Help me think through it. And then also then create like a little voucher so that people will come back and like they get 2 free beers if they buy a pizza. So it's not like they come to my hotel, they eat other people's food on my hotel grounds, and then like I don't make any money from this and they don't come back. And so, those are the type of things where it's like a lot of small businesses, they just don't have the extra people or the bandwidth to do that type of thing. But it allows them to, extend themselves in ways where it's like, hey, these are low risk scenarios and they're not even necessarily trying to replace someone. It's just like, hey, we can't afford to do that. I'm focused on higher leverage things. If you're running a hotel, you do need to focus on hiring your new head of housekeeping. And then being like, hey, here's my idea for restaurant week. Hey, run with this idea while I go check somebody in.
By the way, that is the majority of the economy. I think
Yeah.
people forget that. These
Yeah.
small businesses, small services, these service businesses that serve your lawn or they do landscaping,
Yeah.
etc., power washing. I think people are forgetting that when they're talking about AI. I have a question that came
Yeah.
up while you were just talking, and I'm wondering why you seem to be very comfortable with where AI is. And I think Jason, I can tell you this. I think our generation,
Yeah.
I think we're a little bit older than you. I'm not going to ask your age, but we got used to a world where internet just arose out of nowhere, where we just experiment. We didn't have a guide or a manual,
Yeah.
and our generation was learning this stuff as it came.
Yeah.
And I wonder if that mentality that we have is why maybe we're a little bit more comfortable with it, but maybe young people aren't, because it just worked from the day they were born. And
Yeah.
now AI is another iteration of we're all just learning what this thing is. We don't even know.
I think it's like a two-sided coin or double-edged. I always say double-edged sword because it cuts both ways, but I think it's like there's 2 sides of this thing. There's 2 faces to it. Because you do hear about the younger generation booing at commencement
Yes.
about AI because, well, the thing is like all the companies that they thought were going to hire them when they started however many years ago are talking about AI is going to take your job. I had
And their marketing
somebody,
sucks.
yeah, and there was a someone who is still I graduated from the University of Michigan College of Engineering forever ago, and somebody who was still there a couple years ago reached out to me and was like, should I change my major from computer engineering? And, and it's a thing where I had to kind of say, like, okay, there may be less jobs, but it's just not going to evaporate, and not overnight. But it has people really scared. That being said, people they paint this picture of like, oh, Gen Z is very anti-AI. What they are is like saying like, oh, we just don't even need this entire generation, and like, what are they useful for it? Because this is also the generation where people are saying, oh, they're all just using AI to write their essays, and they're getting more and more clever about it. And there was like I think it was maybe Stanford or somebody, where they did something in kind of like on the course website that made it so like agents couldn't read it, and like, or at least like you couldn't connect to it, like it couldn't search it or whatever. I think if you went and copy pasted it, you could probably get it to work. But these are things where it's like, they clearly are using AI. And I actually think it's like kind of the thing of like when social media became a thing, everyone was like, oh, the social media intern, because it was only like that generation who knew how the heck to like, get things to go viral on Twitter back when like viral was a new word and all these other things. And it was like, now it's actually, I think they are possibly incredibly capable, but because of the way the job market is going, I think it is this thing of, I don't know if we're actually seeing their full capabilities. I think this is happening, like, I'll say in the shadows in their own life, but we're not seeing what happens when you put somebody who's fresh out of school, who's been using an LLM to try to get their homework done for like the last 4 years. They clearly know how to prompt AI. Like, what do they do? Like, how are they solving other problems? Like, all we know about is the cheating, and that's because the professors are talking about it. So what about all the things they're building that, there's nobody to like complain or snitch about it. And that's the thing of like, I actually think that is why they're anti-AI. It's not that they're not AI fluent.
Yeah, that's a hell of a point. It's a brilliant point that maybe it's a bit of projecting. Like, if there's any generation that should know how to use AI and leverage it, it's them.
Yep.
It reminds me of Europeans. I don't know how often you've traveled to Europe, but particularly I was in Germany a lot. And they're like, American tech companies are violating our privacy. We care more about privacy. Google phone, Apple phone, using Google Maps, use Google. So there's this kind of like projecting, right? Like, we use it, but at the same time, it's threatening our jobs, right? And it's like, is that duplicity, or is it just compartmentalizing these topics? Like, oh, this might actually, how long ago was it? Learn to code was that famous statement from Biden, right?
Yeah.
Oh,
I don't even know how long. And now they depended on that statement. And that had been the thing, right? For a long time. Go learn to code. You have guaranteed job. Turns out, maybe it's not true, but that doesn't mean, this is your point, that the skills they've built won't be useful in this environment. I think the AI companies, tech companies are doing a terrible job of marketing this by saying it's displacement. And they're not focusing on augmentation.
Yeah.
Also, HR. I have a lot to say about HR, but let me put it like this.
Yeah.
It's possible that just the job descriptions are changing. The types of people you need to recruit are just different. Maybe they're more generalist. Maybe there are more people who know how to navigate the AI world, experiment, etc. And it's not just, here's your task, go do it, right?
Yeah. It's back to, are we focused on tasks, or are we focused on achieving a goal?
Yeah.
Real quick, you coach startups. What's the biggest lesson or advice you would give anyone looking to start an AI startup at the moment?
Actually, the same advice I would give any startup is, are you solving a real problem? And are you solving a real problem that, again, doesn't put you in neck and neck competition with everyone else? There was a AI video editing startup that I coached like a few years ago. And it was when there were less AI video clipping and video editing tools out there. But there were a lot that were popping up. And my advice to them was like, you need to kind of find a niche within this, because it's not for you, it's not going to be about the pure, hey, look, AI can edit a thing. We know that. And those are going to get better and better and better. And there's tools that are for the pros, and there's tools that are for the, people that are like, I don't know what I'm doing. I just need to kind of make my video for social media look good. And I'm like, who is underserved in this market that would pay for these? And like, do they have unique use cases? And like, kind of where we landed was this idea of like, who are the marketing teams that can't afford to bring on their own video editors for the amount of video that they need to do? You know, and
back to the small, medium size market.
Yeah. Yeah. And even if it's like, even if you're not going that small, there's a lot of businesses where it's like, oh, we have a marketing department, but the only time we do videos, like when we need to do a commercial. But it's like, where does that leave? Like, hey, you should be doing, a quick YouTube reel or some of these other things. And maybe it's like, hey, if you have a tool that can help you figure out how you can do this yourself and then help you with the editing, that's a different set of features than just, hey, AI can add all these different effects. It's like, hey, AI can actually help you figure out your storyboard and like what you need to capture. And like, actually funny enough that that hotel I was talking about, I talked to their social media manager, actually not even a full-time person. She actually also works with like another hotel on a nearby island. But one of the things is like, she's her main day job at that other hotel is not social media. It's like I think she's like managing catering or something else over there. And so the thing is like, while she knows a little bit about social media, there was a lot where it's like, even just using Claude and being able to say like, hey, what are the shots that you should gather, and what are the different narratives you could reuse a lot of these shots with? And like, even just saying like, great, now for each of these narratives, like, how do you assemble these shots in these ways? And what else do you do? And I'm like, for someone who doesn't want to learn how to use Claude, or wants a thing where like they go in and they have the whole visualization and it's not just like a blank little bar that they need to come into every time to produce like a Google Sheet with these list of shots, like how do you build a product around that?
You got to really understand the customer journey then. And that's a lot of work.
Yeah. It's a lot of work. And I think that's the thing for any startup. And people think that, oh, I can just build a thing and the AI will do a thing and then Anthropic will somehow acquire me. And my thing, I'm like, if it's that easy, Anthropic will just figure out how to do it themselves. And you actually really, the reason why someone would acquire you is because you deeply understand the customer journey.
The vertical.
Better than Anthropic, better than Google, better than Meta, better than like anyone who's large enough to want to like have it be worthwhile to be not like just because of the logo, but just has enough money at the right now in this market that hasn't burned it all on tokens to actually acquire you. And that's really where it's like, maybe you built something so technically forward that no one else can replicate it. But this idea of you can just build something super simple. I think there was a period like maybe a couple of years ago where a few startups where they built something super simple got acquired.
Rappers,
but like, but those days are gone, and more of them went out of business than actually, got acquired.
So the advice is get out there and live. Actually, the whole lean startup thing still applies. Get out and talk to people.
Yeah.
Understand their journeys, understand their problems.
Yeah.
And it's very hard to do that from behind a desk. It's especially hard to do that if you're querying the LLM who's just confirming everything that you already believe.
Yeah.
Get out into the real world. I think the hardest thing for people to learn in startups and innovation is the number one thing that kills you is nobody gives a damn about what you think they should care about. All right.
Yeah.
But go find the things they do care about.
Exactly. Find the things that people go, oh my God, this is not just going to save me 2 hours of work, but this saves me 2 hours of work of the thing where I think this task is getting in the way of me doing, higher leverage work or the things that really matter. And, even just for like going back to, I just keep using this as an example just because I've been using it a lot lately of the scheduling tool that I'm using of like, I really, really with all my heart hate scheduling things. And so they're like, clearly somebody figured out that there's this group of us that just really hate scheduling things. Like, and Calendly just mentally doesn't work for me. And then I'm always having to go like, wait, do I need the 30-minute one or the 60-minute one? And then having to pick the link. And I'm just like, I just want to tell you in the email which one to do. Like, figure it out. I'm like, I don't want to look at anyone's Calendly. The other day, a friend sent the Calendly to my scheduling thing, and I was like, oh, I don't think it could do that. And it actually did. It read it and then did a whole thing and booked it through the Calendly and then sent a confirmation. And I was like, this is like witchcraft to me. But find a thing where it's like people hate it enough and they have to do it frequently enough that it is like, I will pay you money because I hate something. And I'm like, for example, people hate doing taxes and like they use a little AI for it, but that happens only like once a year, right? But if you're a small business and like you're like, oh, I constantly need to I need to make my quarterly payments, all this other stuff, maybe more of a use case, but it's like how painful and how frequent is this? Because this is the problem number last. You know, like, yes, it is a problem to me, but it's problem number last. Like, why would I pay you?
Yeah.
And we're coming up on the top of the hour here, so thank you so much for being here on Show Your Priors. Can you tell our audience how they can find you, what you have going on?
Yeah, you can find me at griffinproduct.co. If you're interested in just learning more about me, learning more about my work, you can also find me on LinkedIn. I'm Ann T. Griffin. The T is for Therese. Ann is with an E. And yeah, you can also find me on Twitter, also at Ann T. Griffin as well.
Perfect. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me on. It's been such a pleasure.
All right. We hope you enjoyed that discussion with Ann. She's, I think, one of the leading thinkers when it comes to AI and product strategy. She can help you think through your product strategy and how you connect it to the broader business strategy. And the good thing about her, and I think that's where she distinguishes herself, is she's willing to go down into the dirt with you to work it out, from the customer problems to the value propositions to the segmentations, what that means for your broader strategy. And we talked about some of the cultural issues around AI, and those are things you're going to also have to think about in your product strategy and your branding. So I thought it was a very good conversation, really wide-ranging to think about where AI is going, where we currently are, and how to think about it if you're trying to create a product around AI.
Yeah, I really enjoyed that conversation with Ann. She's really got her finger on the pulse of what's happening in the AI world. She is a great speaker. She's very accomplished. She's also a startup advisor and AI strategy advisor. So you can find her at griffinproduct.co. We hope to have more like Ann and Ann back on the show someday. That was really good. Thank you all for joining us this week. We had a great show. Really enjoyed being here. We do this every Tuesday, so make sure you come back and check us next week. Tell a friend to come with you. Send us a message. Tell us what you want us to talk about. If there's anything you like or don't like, leave it a comment below. We'll see you next week.
Mama, I think I made it. I'm kinda like Tulsa famous. I'm hanging out with Gary. Now they know what my name is. Feeling like Sir Mike, it's money in my name, bitch. Humble to perform on